Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here at beautiful Pleasant Bay, Ontario, Canada, to give you my standard review of the Fujinon XF 23mm f2 RWR lens. Now, the R stands for ring or aperture ring, and so like many other Fuji lenses, this has you can choose to go into an automatic mode, or you can select your aperture manually in 1/3 stop to tenths. WR stands for the fact that it has weather resistance, and so it not only has a good thick gasket at the lens mount, but it also has a number of internal seals, as you can see from this diagram. Now, 23mm is the full frame equivalent of around 35mm. And so this lens actually covers one of the arguably most important focal lengths in prime lenses. And 35mm along with 50 and 85mm are the most popular and arguably the most important of the various prime focal lengths that are out there. And so what Fuji has done, as they've done with a number of these lenses, is that they have a bifurcated approach to these popular focal lengths, and that you have both an f2 or similar option, as we've got here, and then also an f1.4 option. Now, as someone who reviews a lot of other systems, I find Fuji's approach a little bit puzzling here, because as is the case here, the far more expensive, this lens, the f2 version, comes in at about $450 US, and the f1.4 is well over $800 US. But the far more expensive lens, while it has a faster maximum aperture, it doesn't have the weather resistance. And so you've got the less expensive, arguably more consumer grade lens, at least as far as a price point, having what is considered more of a pro grade feature. And I've never really seen that before with any other manufacturer, but it is an interesting approach to one area where I do like the attitude, is that it is to show that aperture isn't everything, and that just having a larger maximum aperture doesn't necessarily make a lens more pro grade in terms of the actual performance of the lens. And I found that to be true in times past. In this case, however, though, it is a little bit puzzling. But at the same time, I find these f2 prime lenses very compact, small, and while not cheap, not bank breaking expensive. I think really in many ways this is the sweet spot for the Fuji X-mount system. At this stage, I've reviewed a number of the pro-grade zooms, all of them, I think, basically out there. And I've also looked at, some of the higher-end lenses. In many ways, as some of you have heard me do, I've made the argument that I don't necessarily find that approach makes a lot of sense compared to the full frame approach you can go, where you can get arguably better image quality and better lens performance at, maybe even less weight and price. But I think the sweet spot really is with these smaller prime lenses that can give you beautiful images like these with great performance, great Fuji color, great detail in the images, but in a very compact form factor and not a whole lot of overall expense. And I think that really is the prime location for the Fuji ecosystem, in my opinion. Now, if you want more information, you're welcome to take a look at the definitive review where I break everything down in detail. Today, I'm just going to more skim the highlights here and give you my conclusion. So when it comes to the build, we've already discussed the primary features there, but the other thing I do want to bear out is that this is a nicely made lens, primarily metals in the construction. It has a focus by wire manual focus ring, as do basically all of these Fuji lenses, to where actual input on the manual ring is routed through the focus motor to drive the elements for focus. And so in this case, it works fairly well. It's not going to make you think you're using a Zeiss lens, but it works quite well overall. It does have a small and rather uncommon 43mm front filter thread. The overall lens is under 60mm in length. It's a little bit wider in diameter towards the base at that, and then it weighs in at only a little over 180 grams. And so this is a compact and lightweight lens. And again, you could put 3 or 4 of these into a small pouch along with your camera and get a lot of great performance at very, very little weight. And so I think, again, that's definitely a strength. The lens has a stepping motor inside, and overall focus is quiet and it is fairly fast. Speed is slowed down a little bit by the fact that I find that it doesn't always immediately lock. Sometimes there's a little bit of pulsing before settling, and that is basically borne out too if we do a video test and take a look at the autofocus. So let's take a look here and maybe you can see from the video results what I'm talking about. So the upside there is that sound, there's not a whole lot of focus sound there, but certainly what there is just a whole lot of unnecessary settling and pulsing as a part of the whole autofocus process. And frankly, I've yet to be really blown away by video AF on any kind of Fuji scenario at this point when I compare it to what I consider to be better options from either Sony or Canon in that regard. I also found that while Fuji IAF is not as good, again, as Canon or Sony, I did find that IAF worked fine, and I was able to get, reliably focused results for my portrait shots. Overall focus quality was good, though I do find that the lens has a rather poor minimum focus distance and a fairly poor maximum magnification of 0.13 times. So not being able to get as close as what I would like, there were situations where I didn't get great autofocus because I felt like the lens should be focusing in a zone where it was not capable of doing so. So it's not as good as a lot of 35mm lenses that I've tested in that regard. Overall, though, I was satisfied with focus speed and with focus accuracy in most situations. Now, as far as the image quality goes, there's some pros and cons that I want to quickly detail here. As far as the pros, the lens does have good resolution across the frame from f2 on. Contrast is not off the charts. There are a little bit of uncorrected longitudinal chromatic aberrations and just a little bit of like a spherical blur on subjects to where there is a little less contrast than the very best lenses provide. However, you do have resolution that goes across the frame, and as you stop it down, not a huge advantage at f2.8, but by f4 it starts to really increase in contrast, and by f5.6 and in that range, you have a lot of great detail for landscape type images, a really strong performance. I found that for portrait work that there was a decent dimensionality of a subject, but what you're going to find is that the combination of a not particularly wide maximum aperture and not a particularly long focal length means that you're not going to have a lot of subject separation in most situations, and so that's just not the strength of the lens. At the same time, I think it'd be a nice lens because it's discreet for something like street photography, and of course if you then stop it down to use it for architecture or landscape, it's a very nice option for that. I love the 35mm focal length. I find it to be very, very versatile, and so there's a lot of good subjects to tackle with this particular lens. Where I was less impressed, however, is when it comes to the bokeh quality. I found that, again, as I've already detailed, there aren't a lot of situations where you can create a lot of bokeh, and having a poor magnification and not a great minimum focus distance doesn't help you in that regard. But I also found that in many cases the quality of the blur was a little bit on the busy side, and so I didn't love it as well for that. I like the sharpness better and the colors better than what I did the bokeh quality. Of course, bokeh is subjective, so your mileage may vary when it comes to that. And as I've already noted, flare resistance is fairly good. There is some vignette at f2. It will start to clear up of its own. Isn't too hard to correct for, if you need to do it manually. But because this is a first-party lens, in most cases, you're going to get very good in-camera profiling and then an automatic embedding of a profile into the raw image, and so pretty easy to work with there as well. So, overall, I think that the image quality is good, other than not loving the bokeh quality. So at the end of the day, as I said, I think that these type of lenses are really kind of best case scenario for Fuji products. I really like these f2 lenses, and some of the accompanying like 16mm f2.8. I love the size of them, and I think that particularly when stopped down, they deliver really impressive colors, detail, and good contrast. I like the images that I see coming off them. And so again, I think that if you're looking for a lens like this and you don't necessarily need the f1.4, you can save yourself a lot of money. And of course, there is an alternative these days, that the Viltrox 23mm f1.4 AF lens for Fuji is also a good option to consider. Though I know that some of you will prefer the reliability of the first-party lens, and if that's the case, I think that the Fujinon XF 23mm f2 RWR may just be a lens that you should pop into your bag. I'm Dustin Abbott. If you look in the description down below, you can find a linkage to my image gallery, so you can check out photos for a little bit longer than a couple of seconds. And beyond that, there are buying links in the description if you want to purchase one for yourself. There's also linkage there to follow me on social media, to become a patron, or to sign up for my newsletter. And if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.